Hello, everybody. Bit of a different intro this time. Welcome to Rethinking Reality, Episode 7. This is the podcast where I talk about the universe and things that might make you scratch your head. Today, we're going to be looking at The Winner's Attitude by John C. Maxwell. I just finished reading this book today. I read the whole thing today, although actually technically not the whole thing. I read up until the study guide, which begins at page 193. I didn't read that part, or the notes. So, yeah, after the notes is the study guide, which I skimmed through it here a few minutes ago. But anyway, so I have once again come up with 5 points, and let me start my stopwatch. I've come up with 5 separate points to talk about. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, first thing I want to talk about is ability versus intelligence. Okay, and by the way, these 5 points are all in the book, or the book talks about them. So, it's true that many people have the intelligence to accomplish extraordinary things, but because they lack the proper attitude, they do not go on to accomplish said things. And so the book talks about kids in school, I think elementary school, and how many teachers who teach young kids will have this experience where they'll say, "Man, this kid is extremely bright. He's too negative. He doesn't have a good attitude. That's why he's not keeping up, or that's why he's not succeeding." And so I think it's definitely notable to think about. It's worth thinking about the fact that maybe the reason why you're not achieving, and I'm just talking about people, maybe the reason why you're not achieving what you want is not because you're incapable of doing it, but because your attitude is not what it should be. And I certainly think I've spotted this in myself numerous times, though it's definitely something I wish to get better at spotting. But the single best predictor, as far as I'm aware, of success in the world is intelligence, IQ. And then the second best predictor is conscientiousness. Now, IQ, as far as I know, cannot be controlled. You can't improve your IQ. Now, you can stop it from diminishing or declining. I've talked about this before. Apparently, exercise is the only way to do that. But you cannot become smarter, at least in terms of IQ. I do think we can become smarter, but not in terms of your IQ, as far as I know. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's true. But what you certainly can control is your attitude and your mindset, right? Which, I don't know, I feel like attitude and mindset are very closely linked. They're not quite the same thing, but I think they're very similar. I really think attitude just has to do with, is your outlook positive or negative? Are you hopeful, or are you anxious, or are you doubtful? At least that's what I think of when I think of attitude, is, do you have a positive or a negative attitude? I guess you can also kind of have a neutral attitude, where it's just like, I'll try this, maybe I'll succeed, maybe I'll fail. But the whole point of this book, essentially, as far as I can tell, is that having a positive attitude will increase your chances of success, and it will also help you develop better relationships with people, stronger relationships, because positivity is contagious as well as negativity. energy is contagious, right? So putting out good energy will multiply, right? If you're around a bunch of people and they're not particularly enthusiastic, the room is kind of dull, and you decide to bring this uplifting spirit to the room, chances are that that spirit is going to multiply, and more people are going to adopt that same mentality, that same attitude that you have, because, well, that's how socializing works. People imitate what they see, and, well, maybe not exactly, at least once people pass the age of about, I don't know, 8 or whatever. But it's certainly true that we influence each other. So, and the book makes that point at least once anyway, is that you shouldn't just have a good attitude so that you can be successful and for yourself and for your own health, but also you should have a good attitude because it helps the people around you. And that's something noteworthy. That's a good thing, obviously. So, anyway, back to the point of ability versus intelligence. And the book says this, really what will win is, I gotta friggin' turn that off. Talent will only get you so far. And I'm pretty sure it says something like, there are plenty of talented people out there who just don't work hard. And who like, there are so many people out there who have talent, but because they're not willing to put in the work, because they're not willing to be positive, they do not achieve near what they're capable of. And so that's worth thinking about, I mean, it's like, what if that was the only thing that was standing in your way, in between what you want and what you have, was your mindset, your attitude. It's something to think about. Now let's talk about the SAP strata, which is a term that's in this book. I think it's towards the middle of the book. Now, the SAP strata is the self-imposed limitations that we put on ourselves. So, there's an illustration in the book. Basically, let's see, I'll try to replicate it with my hands. There's like how we're currently living. There's the limits, that what we believe are our limits, and then there's our potential above that, right? So there's what we're currently achieving, what we believe our limits are, and then what our actual limits are. And it's definitely the case that I would say most, if not every single person alive, well, no, not every single person alive, I don't think. The vast majority of people self-impose limits on themselves, or impose limits on themselves that are way lower than their actual real potential as far as what they can accomplish. And this makes me think of David Goggins, who I've been thinking about a little bit recently. He's talked about this probably multiple times on many occasions, I'm sure. And it's like the more you accomplish, I think this is something he says, which is that the only limits you really have on yourself are the ones that you self-impose. And the more that you accomplish, if you decide to take the path of pushing yourself, if you decide to live a life of constantly pushing your limits and trying to attain more and more, eventually you'll realize that your potential is dang near endless. And like the limit is certainly not as low as you thought, right? And I do think it's true that ultimately we don't know what the upper limit is. Like we don't know what we're capable of. And I think that's one of the things that makes life so interesting, is that it's like, who knows what we can actually accomplish if we really push ourselves, and if we constantly have an attitude of gratitude, but also a mindset of, I'm constantly going to become better every day. I'm going to push what I'm capable. I'm going to push my limits. I'm going to always try to learn more and always become stronger. So, yeah, the STAP strata, I know I've certainly done this. It's I don't know, I would almost say it's a could it be a cognitive illusion or like a bias? I don't know. But it's almost something like that. It's definitely an illusion, some sort of illusion, a psychological illusion. It's like you think that, oh, I can only run a 7-minute mile. That's the fastest I can run a mile, because that's the fastest I've ever run a mile. But in reality, you're capable of running a 5 or 4 minute mile. That's just an example. Um, so that's something that I think is important to constantly keep in mind if you're trying to be successful in any domain, is that the limit is never as low as you think it is. And the only limits you really have are that which you self-impose on yourself. On to the next point, which is, okay, how do we positively affect our attitude? How do we learn to develop a better attitude, or what's a better way of saying it? How do we get to the point to where having a positive attitude is natural, second nature? Well, a lot of it has to do with habits, right? And so, whether it's positive habits or negative habits, habits are very influential. Human beings are creatures of habit, right? And so, they're kind of like a gateway, or like a key to the human mind, is how I kind of think about it. I actually have a book called The Power of Habit that I'm probably going to read next, starting tomorrow. Hopefully I can finish it tomorrow. But yeah, so the more that you work on developing a habit, the stronger that habit becomes. Well, once the habit's formed, the stronger it becomes. And I really think it's all about repetition. I mean, when it comes to the subconscious mind, repetition is like one of its secrets, you could say. If you want to influence your subconscious mind, you have to use repetition. And so, if you practice consistently looking on the bright side, being optimistic but still realistic whenever tragedy occurs and whenever things start to go downhill, then the more eventually it'll just be second nature, and you'll constantly have a positive attitude in, well, almost every situation. I mean, if you're able to constantly have a positive attitude whenever things are going horribly wrong, then, well, it's easy to have a positive attitude when, say, you're trying to learn a new skill, because it's like, that's easy compared to when crap hits the fan and, you're barely surviving. For example, like, you lose your job, you lose your parents, you lose all your friends. Like, if you're still somehow able to have a positive attitude, then that's an accomplishment. So, habits are a great way to to develop a more positive attitude is just practice doing it. Like, force yourself to practice doing it. And how do you do that? Okay, well, one of the things you can do is change the way you talk, which is what another thing that this book talks about. Vocabulary. So the book gives a list of eliminate these words or phrases and start using these words or phrases. So stop saying things like I can't, I don't have enough time. I'm trying to remember them. It'll never happen, it'll never work. I'm unable to do this. Start saying things like I am going to do this. I do have the time, or I will make the time is one of them. I can do this. And, there's all the other different types of phrases. But the point is, words influence your subconscious mind, and words contain meaning, right? We give words meaning. Okay, technically words aren't, I guess, meaningful by themselves, but we give words meaning. And so by constantly uttering phrases that contain positivity within them, we're able to create stronger connections within the parts of the brain, I guess, that are associated with positive emotion and hope and dopamine, probably. And so as a consequence, we're much more likely to succeed because, well, positive emotion is what leads to action, right? And the what would you call it? The feeling that you will experience positive emotion, the hope that you can change something, your circumstances, or I don't know, your income, that's motivation, right? That gives you motivation. And so words are very powerful. And I do believe it's true that words, I don't know, dude. I've had this like theory ever since I had this experience a long time ago when I like tapped into the frequency of rhyming. Like my whole perception of words changed. And I don't know, I've had this thought that like words may be the single most, what would you say? The most powerful form of creation that we have in terms of creating, like manifesting. Words might be the most direct link to manifestation, if that makes sense. And the reason I think that might be true is because, well, God himself spoke into existence. Our creator spoke the universe into existence. So I don't know, it just makes me think, because like we're made in the image of God. So, and by the way, another thing I'll mention is this book talks a lot about the Bible. There's several Bible verses, and some in Psalms, some in Proverbs. And it talks about Job. Who else does it talk about? It talks about Timothy at one point, I think. It talks about Paul, Peter, I believe, as well. And especially Job, because it talks about Job and how he lost everything. Like God took everything from him, like literally pretty much everything. And even his wife said, you should curse God. But Job said, what did he say? I'm to forget what did he say to his wife? He basically told his wife, you're not, I forget what he said. He said, you're speaking like the something woman, I believe, but I can't remember what it was. But ultimately, Job did not lose his faith in God. He chose to have a positive attitude despite all his intense suffering. And so, well, if he can do it, that's something to think about, right? If he can do it, then well, maybe we can do that. right? So, but back to words, right? I mean, God literally spoke the universe into existence. So I don't know, it just makes me think maybe words really are like the most powerful tool of creation, the most powerful thing that we have access to that can change things. I don't know if that made any sense. I'm a little tired, to be honest. My voice is going out. But anyway, so vocabulary is important, right? Just constantly speaking positivity out loud. I think also in your head. I feel like speaking out loud is probably more effective though, because it takes more energy, right? So you're like outputting more positive energy by speaking words that are positive. And so, yeah, that's the fourth point. The last thing is setting goals. This is crucial too because let's see, I'm gonna lean back here. Setting goals is important because, well, without a goal, you have nothing to look forward to, essentially. And I'm trying to work on this because I've never been much of a goal setter, I guess, and I know the reason why, and I've read about this in this book and also in Jordan Peterson's book, at least one of his two books, which is that people don't like specifying what they want because then they know whenever they don't get it, right? So people like to keep what they want vague so that they don't really know when they don't get it, but they also don't know when they get it either, right? Because they haven't specified what it is that they want. So it's important to set goals because then you have something to work towards, right? And that gives you hope in a way, I feel like, because if you are able to achieve one or multiple of your goals, that signals to your brain that you've gone from a lower form of being to a higher form of being, if that makes sense, right? Because you have to grow in order to, if it's truly a goal, it's something that is going to require you to push yourself, and therefore, if you do achieve that goal, that's proof that you've evolved as a person, right? Because you had to do so in order to achieve that goal. So that's why setting goals is important. And also being specific when you set your goals, right? Be specific. This book talks about this, and Jordan Peterson has talked about this too. Use a date. Put a date on your goal. By this day, I want to achieve this exactly. And also, I'm trying to remember. Oh, my what's it called? Trailblazer Planner. I don't know if that's what it's called. For college, in my NG 101 class, talks about setting SMART goals. And let's see, can I remember them? Probably not. It's like sensible, something realistic, attainable, time oriented, not time oriented. But it talks about essentially there's it's SMART is an acronym, and you want your goals to be realistic, attainable. Is that the same thing? I think so. I probably got it wrong, but whatever. But I don't know. At the same time, it makes me think about one time to bring David Goggins back into the topic. David Goggins, there's a video of him on YouTube where he tells a story of a fan, I think it was a fan, who approached him and said, I'm setting these goals, but I feel like I'm not getting better. And David said, well, are you afraid that you're not going to be able to achieve the goals that you're setting? And he said, no. David said, well, that's your problem. You're setting goals that you know you can achieve. You want to set goals that you don't think you can achieve. And I don't know. I feel like that's an interesting perspective Because if you set goals that you don't think you can achieve, then, well, you're going to have to really push yourself in order to achieve them. But I don't know. That's just something to think about. Ultimately, it's important to be specific when setting goals, just as specific as possible. That way you will be more motivated, I suppose. And also it'll be something to keep your mind straight, I suppose, cuz you'll have to think, okay, by this day I said I want to achieve this specifically. And so you'll have to constantly monitor yourself to make sure that you're making progress towards achieving that goal. So, anyway, that's the end of this episode. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Overall, I would say I recommend this book. It's a good book. Here's the back of it. It does have some sections. I'll talk a little bit more about this book. It has some sections of application. I don't know if I can show this or whatever, but like it tells you to write certain things about like the environment you grew up in as a kid and stuff. I didn't fill out all of the whatever you would call it, personal application things, but I did do some of them. So yeah, I didn't talk about near everything within this book, and I haven't for any of the other books I've talked about. My goal with this is essentially to just take 5 different things out of each book that I read and then just talk about them, I guess, in more detail on this podcast, or in a fair bit of detail. So anyway, that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you did. Let me know what books I should read, although I have quite a long list to read. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it if you made it all the way to the end, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.